I want to start by saying something that might sound strange coming from a channel built about Christian faith. I understand why men leave the church, not as theological position, as a lived experience, because I've been one of those men, sitting in a service feeling like a stranger in a place that was supposed to feel like a home. And I've been one of those men who tried to build something real inside a church community and walked away with less than what I came in with. So this isn't a video about where I defend the institution without question. And it's not a video where I tell you the church is irredeemable and you were right to leave. It's an honest look at what actually went wrong, why it happened, and what it costs men specifically. Because I think until you understand what broke, you can't figure out what's actually worth rebuilding. Now, my wife and I attended several churches in South Africa over a number of years. And I want to describe what we actually found. Because I think it's more common that most people in church leadership want to admit, right? It's quite common. The first thing that we noticed in more than one of those environments was that money was central in a way that made everything else kind of feel secondary. Not subtly, but really noticeably. The focus on donations, on giving, on financial blessing as the marker of spiritual health, it was present enough that you couldn't ignore it. And when that's the dominant frequency coming from the front, it changes the whole atmosphere of the place, right? It stops feeling like a community, gathering around something true, and it starts feeling like just a transaction, right? You come in, you give, and you leave. The relationship is between you and the offering plate, right? Not between you and the people around you. The second thing that the leadership didn't really know us. Not like in the early days when you'd expect that, but months in, we were not known, right? Nobody followed up with us. Nobody checked in. You could just disappear from the environment for weeks and nobody would notice or reach out, right? And when you're attending church, a church of any significant size and the leadership kind of functions that way, what you've built is not really a body, you've kind of just built an audience, right? And the difference between those two things are quite enormous in the church especially. So we tried to go deeper, we joined some groups, and what we found there is that it's its own kind of disappointment, right? The hypocrisy is the word that I keep coming back to. People presenting one version of themselves in the group setting and living something visibly different outside. Discrimination that didn't exist in a place built on the premise that every person carries the image of God. A gap between the language being used, the community, the brotherhood, family, and the actual experience of being in the room. Now, I want to be careful here because I'm not saying every church is like this. I'm not saying the people involved were malicious. I'm just saying this is what I found repeatedly, when we tried. And the trying really matters because the easiest thing to dismiss is the man who never engaged. We engaged. We really tried. And we found, and what we found made it harder to engage again. Now, I don't think that our experience is unusual. I think it's one of the most common reasons why men specifically quietly just stop showing up. It's not a dramatic falling away, but just a gradual conclusion that this particular institution, in the form we keep encountering it, is not actually offering what it claims to offer. So what did the church get wrong? And I'm talking specifically about the nameable things, not a vague, cultural critique. The first thing is that it confused programs with presence. A church can have a men's group, a small group structure, discipleship curriculum, a full calendar of events, and still produce an environment where nobody actually knows anybody. Because all these programs create proximity, but they don't automatically create honesty. And without honesty, proximity is just a room full of strangers, who've learned to perform the same, social script around each other. Real community, the kind that Paul describes in Romans 12, where members is be kindly affectionate to another with brotherly love, in honor, giving preference to one another. That doesn't happen through a program. It happens when someone goes first, right? When a leader is actually present with the people, not just present in the building. When the structure exists to create conditions for real connection rather than to perform the appearance of it. The second thing is that it prioritized financial health over pastoral health. And I say this carefully because I understand churches have a real cost, right? It's not cheap, right, to run a church, and it does run on donations. But when the financial ask becomes the loudest, recurring message from the front, something has already gone wrong in their priorities. Because the men sitting in those seats, especially the ones who are searching, who are there because they're trying to find something real, they pick up on that frequency immediately. And what it communicates to them is not that this community is built on truth, it's that this community needs something from you. And men who are already cautious about vulnerability cannot open up in environments that feel transactional. Now, Jesus actually addressed this directly in John 10, verses 12 to 13. He describes the hired hand who abandons the sheep when the wolf comes, because he is a hired hand and he does not care about the sheep. The contrast he's drawing is between a shepherd who has a real stake in the people and a professional who has a stake in the role. That distinction is visible to people in the seats. Men especially can feel it. The third thing, and this is the one that costs the most, is that it's produced an environment where the gap between what was being preached and what was being lived was visible enough to be damaging. Hypocrisy in a church doesn't just make people cynical, it makes them feel foolish for even having trusted. And a man who feels foolish for trusting doesn't, try again very easily. He just closes the door and, more carefully next time. He holds back and eventually just stops coming back at all and just tells himself that his faith, it was his own faith that failed rather than the environment that actually just broke his trust. Now, Ezekiel 34 is one of the hardest passages in scripture for church leaders because it is God speaking directly and with real anger towards shepherds who failed their sheep. The weak you have not strengthened, the sick you have not healed, the broken you have not bound up, the driven away you have not brought back, the lost you have not sought. That's not a mild rebuke. That's God holding leadership accountable for specific failures of presence and care. Now, I don't read that passage to condemn. I read it because it tells me the problem I experienced isn't new. It's old enough to be in the Old Testament, and God is not confused about who is responsible when the people he entrusted to shepherd's care end up scattered. So here's what I want to say to the man who has been where I've been. Your cynicism is not the same as unbelief. You can be deeply skeptical of the institution and still be reaching towards the God the institution was supposed to point to, right? You can still be reaching towards the institution that God was pointing to, right? Those are two separate things. And it's important to hold them separately, because the failure of the church community to be what it claimed to be is the real thing that's happened to you. It's worth naming it as that rather than internalizing it as a failure of your own faith. You tried. That matters. The environment failed to meet what you brought to it. And at the same time, I say this as someone who's still kind of working it out myself. The answer to a broken institution is not no institution, or or a smaller one, or an honest one. Even just 2 or 3 people who are willing to be real with each other. In Matthew 18 verse 20, for where 2 or 3 are gathered together in my name, I am there in the midst of them. The threshold for real Christian community is not a building, a program, or a polished Sunday service, right? It's 2 or 3 people willing to actually show up for each other. Now, I haven't fully solved this. I'm living in Uruguay now, where I'm finding even that is logically hard, right? The English-speaking Christian community here is very small, and the circumstances are real. But I know what I'm looking for now in a way that I didn't before. I understood what had gone wrong, not the performance of the community, but the real thing. Even if it's smaller and less impressive than what I imagined, that's worth holding on for. Even after the disappointment, especially after all the disappointments. And guys, if you made it to the end of this video, I am trying to build a community of Christian men here where we can hold each other accountable. We can be honest with each other. And if you guys like the video, remember to like, comment, and subscribe. And I'll see you in the next one.